Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Remember, if you love film or television content, please consider clicking that subscribe button because today, I know no one's talking about this show at all, but I really wanted to bring some attention to it, and that is Winning Time Season 2. So, let's get into it. Also, this will be a full spoiler discussion. I'm going to be talking about things that happen at the end of this season, as I think it's just instrumental in talking about this show and what has happened with it. So if you didn't know what Winning Time was, it is a HBO series based on the Lakers dynasty from the late 70s all the way through the 80s about Magic Johnson and the Showtime Lakers. It also details that rivalry between the Lakers and the Celtics during that time, and it had garnered a lot of controversy for kind of being a little bit too fictitious at times with some details. The players during that time were not really consulted in the making of this show, and some of them really didn't like it. However, I think as a viewer of this show, I think it was fantastic. I really loved season 1, and season 2 might be even better. Now, I wasn't really feeling that in the beginning of this season. It felt like nothing was really happening and it wasn't justifying its existence too much, where it was just meandering, talking about Magic's injury woes and having a little bit of tension there as it's leading to him signing this lifelong contract that was more than what a lot of people made in the NBA back then. It then builds to this clash between Coach Paul Westhead, played by Jason Segel, who gives absolutely stellar work here, both in season 1 and 2. It's probably some of my favorite stuff from him personally. And then Quincy Isaiah as Magic Johnson is just incredible and just captures that essence on screen so well, I think. But this battle that happens kind of at that midway point of the season, I think was brilliant, as Magic isn't really adapting to the system that Paul Westhead has. He kind of wants to have that full team basketball where every man is held accountable, and it kind of strays away from Showtime and that flashiness that came with being a Laker back then. And Magic Johnson, of course, just doesn't feel comfortable in this scenario. He's not allowed to shine and have all the finesse and bravado that he always showed on the court. And we kind of get this showdown episode where they're both trying to talk to Jerry Buss, the owner, about why their direction is the way that they should move forward. But Jerry Buss is kind of committed to both of these people with massive contracts. We obviously know what happens with the past, and what actually happened here was Paul Westhead got fired the very next day after Magic Johnson asked for a trade because he wasn't enjoying his time on the Lakers anymore. That was the only time that Magic asked for a trade, and they rectified it like that because Magic was their key guy. He was the best player on the Lakers during that time. It's kind of strange now. A lot of people talk about Kareem being one of the greatest and up there, but Magic's not really included in that discussion. And having watched a lot of these games in the 80s, I have a full Celtics box set going through these iconic games. A game that I'm going to be talking about, and a series that I'm going to be talking about later in this video, is shown in this season. And Magic was the A-side. He was the guy that really elevated them to being the Showtime Lakers and winning all those rings. Not that Kareem wasn't important. He was a superstar and a fantastic player, but Magic was the guy back then, and they really committed to him with these massive contracts and kind of doing everything that they could to make sure that he was happy with his time. Now, something that I feel like the showrunners were really conscious of this time was kind of detailing what were some of the more real elements of the show versus some of the more fictional side of things. I kind of never really cared about it being a little bit more blown up for TV. Every single film that is based on a true story, or every single TV show that is based on a true story, usually gets swapped around in some kind of aspect to make it more dramatic, or just play within a 3-act structure within a film or a TV show. So them doing it with this particular story didn't really bother me at all, because of course they're going to do that. However, because they're so conscious of it, every time there is an event that seems kind of outlandish, they kind of pause for a second with texts that say, yes, this actually happened. That didn't happen at all in the first season, and they're really conscious of it, and they're doing it here. I didn't mind it because there are some things you're like, no way that happened, and then they pause and say, yes, it actually did, and it kind of blows you away a little bit. But after Paul Westhead leaves in this show, unfortunately, we get no more Jason Segel, but we get Adrian Brody stepping up as Pat Riley. He has also been fantastic in this show. In season 1, he was great, and he had this really cool connection with Magic Johnson. The scenes with just Adrian Brody and Quincy Isaiah were fantastic, I thought, and they continue to be here. But I think Adrian Brody really steps up a notch here. He has some fantastic scenes as Pat Riley, where he's kind of seen as this nice guy, and the team's kind of walking all over him in the beginning because he just wants everyone to have their freedom and to kind of throw out what Paul Westhead did and let the players have fun. However, it went too far in that direction. And so Pat Riley needed to step up and be firm. And he finally does in this very electric scene where he puts them all in his place. He just plays this character so well. Another thing I think that really elevates Winning Time 2 is a little bit more on that focus of the Celtics rivalry with the Lakers. I think it is one of the most beautiful rivalries in all of sports. There's just so much animosity there. And as a Celtics fan, I have so much respect for that Lakers organization. But yeah, I can't really say I love them that much. But those teams, the Showtime Lakers, were fantastic. So I do have a lot of respect and love for those teams. But of course, I'm rolling with the Celtics every single time. And I loved that we got a little bit more of a deep dive on Larry Bird here, played by Sean Patrick Small, who just seems to capture that Larry Bird energy, where he would just walk on the court and just fuck everyone up. He was just such a badass player, and he doesn't look it. It's just amazing. Like, there's an episode that purely focuses on Larry Bird, and the college that he used to play for recruits him again. He walks on in jeans and boots and a coat and just dominates everyone. And then, yes, it pauses and says, this actually happened. That's just such a typical Larry Bird story. We obviously know ones like the 3-point contest where he walks into the locker room and he's like, okay, who's coming in second? And then wins wearing his warm-up gear. He's just such a badass. And Sean Patrick Small just captures that energy so well. I love what they did here. He's kind of a perfect antagonist in this show because it also wants to show that there is a lot of reasons to sympathize with him. He's still a real person, and he kind of went through a lot. I don't know too much about what they dramatize here versus what is real, but the show doesn't go fully fictitious. It just kind of blows things out a little bit a lot of the time. The events that happen are usually consistent with the show, and if a lot of the stuff is true with Larry Bird's past, you know, he had a lot of weight there and he dealt with some loss. And, you know, I think that's what gave him that grit as a player. That Larry Bird episode was one of the first steps to me in really showing that Winning Time Season 2 was kind of a little bit different here and kind of wants to elevate a lot more. I also need to talk about Jerry Buss, played by John C. Reilly. I think his arc in this season is a lot weaker than in the first season, and that's kind of overall across the board. Apart from some of the focal characters in this season, a lot of the side characters just don't get that much of an arc this time around, when in the first season they really did. You got a lot more of Kareem and Norm Nixon and a lot of the supporting cast. Here, you do get some little aspects and evolutions of their character in some ways, but it's a lot more minimized compared to the previous season. And the same can be said to Jerry Buss. I think that the scenes with him were fine, but you kind of just want to go back to the team dynamics of the Lakers and what's going on there. I think the Jerry Buss stuff that really works, though, is that rivalry once again with the Celtics and Red Auerbach, another famous owner who was responsible for the Bill Russell Celtics and the Larry Bird Celtics. You know, two iconic teams within just the amazing Celtics history. And a bit of a fact here, he passed away just before the 2008 season, where they went on to win their first championship since Larry Bird. It's such a shame that he never got to witness that. But yeah, he was a legendary owner And that rivalry with Jerry Buss was fantastic. These two titans within NBA history going at it. Just beautiful stuff. Now, let's get into the final episode. I think that's where the most things to discuss really lie. Because I think on its own, it's a fantastic episode. But there's things about it, which I'm going to go into, that make this a little bit more mixed. And it's kind of out of its control, unfortunately. But we'll get into that. So, firstly, we're going into the 1984 finals, where the Celtics and Lakers finally meet for the first time in the finals. Magic has won, I think, 2 rings at that stage, and Larry Bird's won 1, and they're finally going at it to prove who's better. The show's always building up about that Magic versus Larry. They both want to prove that they're better than the other. At the end of Winning Time Season 1, you get the amazing shot after the Lakers win that championship. Larry Bird just is there, just shooting hoops. He's obviously driven to beat Magic. I just love that stuff, and this finals and the way that they play it out on screen does feel very authentic to what actually happened. I have a full documentary box set which has a little bit of commentary on some of these games from the players and the staff, as well as the actual games themselves. So I've seen a lot of the games in the 1984 finals, and I really, really loved how they captured that here. I think it was fairly authentic. Even the moment where Kurt Rambis absolutely gets clobbered by Kevin McHale in that game, they kind of don't shy away from the fact that while it was a dirty play, they needed it to get that extra oomph. They were feeling very lethargic. They weren't really hitting their stride until that moment happened, and it kind of lit a fire under the Celtics, which kind of got them over the line. And I do agree, it was one of the most dirtiest plays in NBA history. Kurt Rambis could have gotten seriously hurt, and it did not look fun. That looked so painful, and watching that in that game was kind of shocking. You're kind of not expecting it, and then boom, it comes out of nowhere. And they really do a good job of showing that. They also go into the Boston Garden game where it was extremely hot, and this part I don't really know about. I'm a little bit unsure about this, where it is kind of alluding to Red Auerbach having a hand in upping the temperature. They're not giving the showers the cold water for Kareem to cool down and things like that. Some dirty tricks behind the scenes that kind of cause that. Now, from my knowledge and in the documentary that I watched, the Boston Garden was apparently infamously hot. They didn't have any aircon or anything like that. It's not like today's NBA. And it was kind of a big reason as to why they moved on to the TD Garden now and modernizing the arena. So I'm not really on board with them going, oh, they just did it to win that game. I think that that arena was always like that, and it was just a battle of who could get through it the best. You know, I don't know how the heating would benefit the Celtics. Boston is a notoriously cold place, and LA's pretty warm, so you think that that temperature would benefit the Lakers more than the Celtics, really. So that part I'm a bit iffy on. Now, this final episode displaying this brutal series, I think was a beautiful display of the Celtics-Lakers rivalry. It does a good job of showing both sides and how much they both really want it. Especially Larry Bird. He's watching his teammates joking after the loss, and he's staring directly at them while talking to the media. And he's calling them out, saying they don't have enough heart. And I love that about Larry Bird. He always held his players accountable. He was a true leader. Kind of similar to both Magic and Kareem, just true leaders who could really elevate their teams. And it kind of makes you miss those kinds of times. I mean, even in the past 10 years, there was a more emphasis on having a little bit of pride in the jersey you wore and the team you played for. And I understand that in nowadays NBA, the front offices don't have too much loyalty to the players, and the players definitely do need to stand up for themselves a little bit more, and they have done an excellent job of doing that lately. But I do miss the times where things were a little bit more than a paycheck. The front office had loyalty to the players, and the players had loyalty to the team. And while I do love the current NBA a lot, it does feel like it is missing something. In terms of the magic that some of these rivalries had, this show just does an excellent job of showing how big these were. And even though it was so over the top, And some things definitely needed to be changed, like the fan reactions. I mean, some of them were rabid. And back then, as soon as the championship game was over, they were allowed to just run on the court and storm it. It kind of felt like a riot. It seemed really dangerous for the players, as the show showcases, where Kareem and a bunch of players getting into fights with the fans because they're jumping all over them and attacking them. And they've just got no way of getting out of there without punching someone or pushing them, getting them out of the way. They literally have to fight to the locker room. And that goes for everyone, both teams. I just thought that was really strange and it was so dangerous. And I love that the show kind of shows that. Okay, so now we're going to go into some of my problems with this show. Or mainly this season, really, because firstly, this season is 7 episodes long, which is 3 episodes shorter than season 1. And it feels like that there are 3 seasons of television crammed into it. Yeah, it's definitely not boring by any means, but some just entire seasons of this Showtime Lakers dynasty just get skipped over in an episode. Now, with hindsight, we now know exactly why that is, because unfortunately the show did not get renewed for season 3. Despite the fact that it reviewed well, it did not draw viewership. The first season had all this controversy surrounding it, and it felt like HBO backed off a lot with marketing this show. I am a massive fan of this show, and I barely knew it was coming out. I saw a big reel of all the HBO shows that are coming out within the next year, and it popped up for 2 seconds. And I was like, oh, they're making a season 2 of Winning Time? I didn't even know. I didn't even know if there was a trailer for this thing. There probably is, but they didn't really do a good job of pushing it. And I think that led to its poor viewership numbers, which led to it being cancelled, unfortunately. And because of that, it feels like they're trying to cram in the entire story within 7 episodes, and that's no easy feat. And as I said, while I really love that final episode, as a series conclusion, however, it feels a little bit disappointing because it doesn't wrap up the entire story in a satisfying way. It wraps up that season really well, and you could go into way more seasons. There's way more stories to tell, but at the end of this season, the Lakers lose the series to the Celtics, and it shows that devastation that they're going through. And then 2 seconds later, it randomly cuts to this happy scene of Jerry and Jeannie Buss celebrating that they own the Lakers, and then it has just text afterwards detailing the rest of the story. And I found that very disappointing because some of the stuff that happens later on is very fascinating. I don't know if they should have gone into Magic Johnson's HIV diagnosis or anything like that. I think that's probably starting to go into more disrespectful territory if they don't treat it the right way, and Magic is already against this show, so I think showcasing that in the show would be a little bit strange. But in terms of just keeping it within the basketball context and talking about these seasons, there's still like 2 or 3 final series between the Celtics and the Lakers where they're going back and forth, and they're just as iconic, and we just don't get to see that, unfortunately. I think, obviously, the perfect way to have ended this show would have been with the Lakers winning their championship against the Celtics. It's just kind of that nice storybook ending to a TV show. And that's such a shame because I truly think that there could have been 5, 6, 7 seasons of quality TV and you wouldn't be milking it at all. They would be very well paced and fit perfectly if you're focusing on specific iconic seasons and maybe filling the gaps between each of these seasons. You could have gotten that much content out of there. And they would have all been excellent, especially if they just kept on the same trajectory that they've been following. The main thing that I think is just sorely lacking from all of this is the fact that Magic and Larry Bird later become good friends in life. They have a mutual understanding of what they needed to do during that time and how they were both leaders of these iconic franchises. They're both around the same age. They had very similar journeys. And there's this excellent story of how Magic and Larry kind of met properly for the first time on Larry Bird's ranch where they were filming this commercial. And Larry's mum was instrumental in kind of getting them to talk to each other and be friendly. And they kind of realized that they had a lot more of a stronger connection than they realized and have later become friends. And I'm just a little bit disappointed that we didn't get to see that. I think that's a really heartwarming conclusion to all of this where, yes, there was that animosity and a very heavy, intense rivalry between the two. They both wanted to prove that they were better than the other one. And I love that. That's competition. That's what it's about. But then to show that it's just competition, as people outside of basketball, they can be good friends. And I think that's a really excellent message to take home from this show that we unfortunately never got to see. And they kind of detail that in text again, where it says that after Magic's HIV diagnosis, Larry was one of the first people that he called to talk about it. And that kind of shows the beauty of their relationship in a lot of ways. And the fact that, once again, there were just so many moments that we never got to see was just such a shame. Even though the show isn't about him at all, I would have loved to have seen a little bit of an appearance from Michael Jordan or something, where they're kind of realizing that they're at the end of their era and Michael's starting to take over. That would have been another excellent way to end the show, where it's okay, we're passing the torch on to the next person. There's just so much potential for the rest of the show, and it's just so disappointing that it got canned, because I really love this show, both seasons. I think season 2 overall was actually an improvement over the first season. While the first season is definitely probably more consistent in terms of its pacing, they definitely had that one season to go off and they knew exactly what they wanted to do. Season 2, they seemed unsure at first whether it was going to get cancelled, and I feel like they got the news that it was going to get cancelled prior to them filming, because just the way that it's filmed, written, paced, and the finale itself all feel like, yes, they knew that they were going to get cancelled, but they didn't have too much time to really figure it out. As a season of television, I think that Winning Time Season 2, I'm going to give it a similar score to what I gave the first season, which was a 4.5 out of 5. I truly think it was excellent television. I loved all of it. There wasn't one bad episode in this show. I liked all of them. I loved its exploration of these characters and the people that were a part of such an interesting time in the NBA, where they really brought it to the limelight. The NBA was a dying product back then, but Magic and Larry really brought it up. They walked so Michael Jordan could run, essentially, and really blow up the NBA. And I think that this show overall was quite beautiful in what it did. I think it does a pretty good job of examining these people. I don't think it goes too outlandish. I don't feel like it's too disrespectful. I'm sure if you're in that situation and they're telling your story without talking to you, I can see how that is quite disrespectful overall. But just as a viewer of this show, I think it was amazing. And I highly recommend you check it out, especially if you're a fan of just the NBA and you love the magic that these rivalries bring and you love that NBA history. I think that this is an essential era to learn about if you're trying to learn about the NBA. And learn about it properly. Don't just go into, Larry versus Magic. I know that is the key point, but there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, and there's a reason why some of these games just have that mystique to them. It wasn't just those two. The rest of the teams were amazing. They were both superstar teams that were just going up against each other. And there was a genuine question about who was better, because if they were both on their own in the NBA, they would have dominated for years and years, but they just have to keep meeting each other and prove which one was the best. It's such a beautiful era of basketball, and that was probably where the Celtics-Lakers rivalry was at its peak, I feel like. And it's honestly such a shame that we don't really get to see rivalries like this anymore, true rivalries. You kind of get to see some more competitive games, and some people bring the intensity, but just not anymore. And this show really takes you back to that era. And as a Celtics fan, I was happy with it. I think their interpretation of the Celtics and that culture was beautiful. I'm fine with them being the antagonist to the Lakers, because they were. The Lakers were also the antagonist to the Celtics. They saw each other as real rivals, and I think there was a lot of mutual respect in between, because they knew that I want to go up against that person. I want to go up against that team. They knew that. And once again, it just shows that. And it also illustrates the difference in these cultures. The Lakers were wanting to be more flashy and kind of bring about the spectacle of the NBA, which is essential for getting it that money and blowing it up like it did. But the Celtics were a lot more traditionalist in their approach. They're all about winning culture and playing as a team. And once again, the show does a great job of showing that. Anyway, I'm probably rambling on now. I just want to say, go watch Winning Time Season 2. It's excellent. Go check it out. If you have seen it, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Are you unhappy that it got cancelled? Are you fine with how it ended? I personally would have loved to have seen more, but it is what it is. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.